A store closing does not look like a crisis at first. It looks like a paper sign taped to a glass door, a few empty shelves, a parking lot with fewer cars, a pharmacy counter that closes earlier than it used to, a cashier quietly telling customers that next Friday is the last day. Then the lights go out, and for the company, that location becomes one line in a restructuring plan. But for the neighborhood, it can mean something else entirely. A longer drive for groceries, a harder trip for prescriptions, fewer part-time jobs, less foot traffic, one more empty building in a place that already felt like it was losing pieces of itself. This is not just about big retailers closing stores across America. It is about what happens when the companies that became part of daily life decide that some places are no longer worth serving. When people hear that a retailer is closing stores, it can sound almost routine. A weak location, a lease that expired, a company trying to cut costs, a business decision. And on paper, that is often exactly what it is. But a store is not only a business unit. For a company, a store is a location number. For a community, it can be a pharmacy, a grocery stop, an employer, a meeting place, a source of foot traffic, and sometimes the last useful anchor in a shopping center that is already fading. That is the difference. A corporate report may say, underperforming location, but a resident may say, that was where I picked up my blood pressure medicine, or that was where my daughter had her first job, or that was the only place nearby where groceries were still affordable. The language changes depending on where you are standing. From the headquarters, closing a store can look like discipline. From the parking lot, it can look like abandonment. And this is why the retail closure story matters. Because American retail did not simply sell products. It quietly became part of the physical infrastructure of ordinary life. Big stores replaced small stores. National chains replaced local options. Suburban shopping centers replaced main streets. Pharmacies, grocery stores, discount stores, convenience stores, department stores. They became the places where people managed the practical details of living. Food, medicine, school supplies, work clothes, paper towels, phone chargers, birthday cards, cold medicine, a quick meal after a long shift. When those places start disappearing, the loss is not always dramatic. It is logistical, and logistical loss is easy to underestimate. A store closing does not always make life impossible, but it can make life harder. 10 minutes farther, $20 more expensive, one fewer employer, one less reason for people to visit a shopping center, one more errand that now requires a car, a phone app, a delivery fee, or help from someone else. This is how decline often arrives in everyday life, not as one major collapse, but as a series of small removals. A pharmacy removed, a grocery option removed, a mall anchor removed, a discount store removed, a convenience store removed. Each one can be explained, but together, they change how a place feels. And once enough of these everyday places disappear, the question becomes larger than retail. It becomes a question about access. Who still gets convenience? Who has to travel farther? Who gets replaced by delivery? And who is simply left with an empty building? The most important thing to understand is that American retail is not simply dying. That would be too simple. Some stores are closing. Others are opening. Some companies are shrinking. Others are expanding. Some locations are being abandoned. Others are being remodeled, automated, converted, or turned into pickup hubs. The real story is not retail collapse. It is retail sorting. Stores are being sorted into two groups: locations worth keeping, and locations that no longer justify the cost. That distinction matters. A company can be healthy and still close stores. A brand can be profitable and still leave certain communities. A chain can close hundreds of locations and still open new ones somewhere else. This is what makes the current moment so unsettling. The store may not disappear from America. It may disappear from your America. From your street, from your town, from your side of the city, from the neighborhood where the numbers no longer work. A physical store is expensive to operate. There is rent, labor, insurance, utilities, security, inventory, maintenance, delivery, refrigeration, theft prevention, credit card fees, local taxes, and the cost of simply keeping lights on in a building large enough for modern retail. If a location does not bring in enough traffic, the company has a decision to make. It can keep serving that area because the community depends on it. Or it can close the location because the spreadsheet says the capital belongs somewhere else. Most public companies choose the spreadsheet. That is not surprising. It is how they are built. But it creates a tension that communities feel directly. People experience stores as necessities. Companies experience stores as assets. And when an asset becomes weak, companies move on. That is where the social cost begins. Because the people left behind do not get to restructure their lives as easily as a corporation restructures its footprint. A company can close a store and shift investment. A senior without reliable transportation cannot simply shift her pharmacy trip 25 minutes farther away. A part-time worker cannot instantly replace a lost job. A small restaurant near a dying shopping center cannot magically replace lost foot traffic. This is the gap between business efficiency and human dependency. And 2026 is showing that gap more clearly. Start with 7-Eleven. A convenience store sounds small compared to a department store or supermarket. But convenience stores are one of the clearest signs of how American daily life is changing. For decades, they sat near gas stations, intersections, commuter routes, apartment complexes, and neighborhoods where people needed something quickly. Coffee before work, a sandwich on a break, milk at night, a snack for a child, a phone charger, a lottery ticket, a quick stop when the grocery store felt too far. These stores were built around speed, traffic, repetition, small purchases, people moving through the day. So when a chain like 7-Eleven closes hundreds of locations, the meaning is not that convenience is gone. It is that convenience is being repriced. Some locations still make sense, others do not. If commuter patterns changed, if fuel economics changed, if labor costs rose, if security costs increased, if the neighborhood no longer produces enough profitable traffic, then a store that once looked essential can become expendable. This is the new retail filter. Not every location survives. Only the ones that fit the new math. And that creates an important question. What happens to a place when the convenient stop is no longer convenient? For some people, nothing much. They drive farther. They use an app. They stop somewhere else. But for others, the closure removes the last nearby place open late. The last place to buy basics without a long trip. The last nearby source of quick food. The last casual job within walking distance. The closure may not look serious from far away. It is just a small store, a small sign, a small parking lot. But many communities are built from small conveniences. Take enough of them away, and daily life becomes less forgiving. This is the first layer of the story. Convenience is not disappearing. It is becoming more selective. And that same selectivity is now reaching places that feel much more essential. Pharmacies. A department store closure can hurt a mall. A pharmacy closure can hurt a person. That difference matters. When a Walgreens, CVS, or Rite Aid location closes, the loss is not only shampoo, greeting cards, candy, and cold medicine. It can mean prescriptions move farther away. Vaccines move farther away. A pharmacist who knew the neighborhood disappears. A senior who used to walk or drive 5 minutes now has to plan a longer trip. For younger and healthier people, this may be inconvenient. For older adults, people with chronic illness, people without cars, and people living in lower-income areas, it can become a real barrier. Medication is not like a sweater. You cannot always postpone it. You cannot always substitute it. You cannot always wait for a better sale. And the people who need pharmacies most are often the people least able to absorb distance. This is why pharmacy closures deserve their own category. The drugstore chain business has been under pressure from many directions. Lower prescription reimbursement, online competition, shoplifting concerns, labor costs, changing consumer behavior, weak front-of-store sales, lease costs. A store may close for business reasons, but the human result is that medical access gets thinner. Imagine a person who takes blood pressure medication, another medication for diabetes, a third for arthritis. Maybe a spouse needs heart medication. Maybe a child needs antibiotics. The pharmacy used to be built into the weekly routine. Now the same routine requires more planning, more transportation, more dependence, more room for error. That is the hidden risk. When access becomes harder, adherence can become harder. People stretch prescriptions. They delay refills. They wait until someone can drive them. They transfer prescriptions and hope the new pharmacy has stock. They call, wait, get put on hold, and try again. Nothing about this looks like a national crisis. It looks like an older person sitting in a car outside a closed Walgreens, reading a sign on the door. And that is the kind of image that tells the story better than any chart. Patricia Lewis is 71. She lives in a suburb outside St. Louis. She worked for 32 years as a medical receptionist. She is retired now. She lives alone. Her daughter is 45 minutes away. Her son moved to Arizona years ago. Patricia still drives, but not at night if she can avoid it. For years, her pharmacy was 6 minutes from her apartment. She knew the parking lot. She knew where the blood pressure machine was. She knew the pharmacist by name. She knew which aisle had the compression socks, which freezer had the cheaper dinners, and which cashier moved slowly, but always asked about her grandchildren. Then the sign went up. Store closing. At first, she thought it was only that location. Then the prescriptions were transferred to another pharmacy, 24 minutes away. That does not sound like much to someone who drives every day. But for Patricia, it changed the shape of an errand. Before, 6 minutes there, 6 minutes back. A familiar store, easy parking, no highway. Now, 24 minutes there, 24 minutes back. More traffic, a bigger intersection, a store she does not know, a parking lot she avoids after dark. On screen, old pharmacy trip, 6 minutes each way. New pharmacy trip, 24 minutes each way. Monthly prescription pickups, 3 extra travel time per month, 108 minutes. But the real cost is not time. It is dependence. Because now Patricia has to think differently. What if the prescription is not ready? What if it rains? What if she feels dizzy? What if the trip takes too long? What if she has to ask her daughter? What if one day she stops driving? This is how a store closure becomes bigger than a store. It changes the quiet confidence a person has in managing life alone. Patricia does not describe herself as abandoned. That word is too dramatic. She says something smaller. It just used to be easier. That sentence is the emotional center of this entire issue. A lot of American life still functions, but it used to be easier. And when enough things become harder at the same time, the difficulty becomes structural. Now move from the pharmacy to the mall. Macy's is not just a department store. For many Americans, Macy's was part of a larger retail world that once felt permanent. The mall, the anchor store, the food court, the escalators, the parking lot full on weekends, the back-to-school shopping trip, the holiday windows, the idea that middle-class shopping had a physical center. For decades, department stores helped hold malls together. They brought traffic. Smaller stores relied on that traffic. Restaurants relied on shoppers. Teenagers got part-time jobs. Families spent Saturdays there. The mall was not only a place to buy things, it was a social environment, a climate-controlled version of public life built around consumption. That model has been weakening for years. Online shopping changed habits. Younger consumers changed tastes. Fast fashion changed price expectations. Warehouse clubs changed bulk purchasing. Discount chains changed value shopping. Luxury moved in one direction. Low-cost basics moved in another. And the middle department store was squeezed. This is what Macy's closures represent. Not just one company reducing underperforming stores, but the shrinking of an older middle-class retail ritual. When a Macy's leaves a mall, the empty space is enormous. It is not like losing a small boutique. An anchor store leaves behind a physical hole, a dark entrance, an empty wing, a parking lot that no longer fills, a signal to other tenants that the center may be weakening. And once that signal spreads, decline can become self-reinforcing. Fewer shoppers, fewer tenants, less investment, more vacancies, lower energy. A place people stop choosing. That is the quiet danger of anchor closures. They do not just remove a store, they can remove confidence. And commercial places, like people, depend on confidence more than they admit. A department store closure changes shopping habits. A grocery closure changes survival habits. This is why Kroger's planned closures matter. A supermarket is not a casual retail location. It is one of the core systems of daily life. People may shop online for shoes. They may delay buying furniture. They may skip a mall trip for months. But food is constant. Every week, sometimes every few days, a household needs groceries. When a grocery store closes, the impact depends on where it is. In a wealthy suburb with several alternatives, it may be frustrating. People adjust. They drive to another store. They switch apps. They complain about traffic. But in a rural town, a lower-income neighborhood, or a place with limited transit, a grocery closure can change the food map. The nearest full supermarket may now be farther away. Fresh produce may become harder to access. Older people may depend more on rides. Families may shop more often at convenience stores, where the prices can be higher and the selection smaller. Delivery may exist, but delivery has its own cost. Fees, tips, minimum orders, app access, credit cards, substitutions, the assumption that everyone can simply go online. This is why replacement is not the same as access. A closed grocery store can be replaced in theory, but if the replacement requires a car, a smartphone, a membership, or extra fees, then it does not serve everyone the same way. The old store may have had problems. Maybe the lines were long. Maybe the building was dated. Maybe prices had gone up. But it was there. And for essential retail, there has value. This is something spreadsheets can miss. A grocery store is not only profitable or unprofitable. It is part of how a community feeds itself. And when that system pulls back, the burden does not disappear. It moves on to households. Here is the twist. Many people assume that when the economy gets harder, discount stores automatically win. And sometimes they do. When households are squeezed, shoppers trade down. They look for cheaper food, cheaper household goods, cheaper clothes, cheaper seasonal items. That should help value retailers. But even discount retail has limits. Low prices often mean low margins. Low margins leave less room for error. If rent rises, labor costs rise, shipping costs rise, theft rises, insurance rises, or customers become too stretched to buy anything beyond essentials, the model can weaken quickly. Discount stores also expanded aggressively in many parts of America, sometimes into towns and neighborhoods that larger retailers ignored. That expansion created access, but it also created saturation. Too many locations can compete with one another. Weak stores can drain resources from stronger ones. A company may eventually decide that the chain is healthier with fewer locations. Again, from the corporate side, that can be logical. But from the community side, it can feel like one more withdrawal. The discount store often serves shoppers who already have fewer options. People on fixed incomes. People without warehouse club memberships. People who buy small quantities because they cannot afford bulk. People who need a few basics between paychecks. People whose grocery budget depends on price differences that wealthier households barely notice. When a discount store closes, it may not make national headlines. But for the people who used it, the loss is immediate. A cheaper detergent option disappears. A nearby canned food aisle disappears. A low-cost birthday gift option disappears. A place to stretch $20 disappears. This is where the retail closure story connects directly to the cost of living crisis. Because the stores closing are not only places where Americans spend extra money, some of them are places where Americans try to survive inflation. And when survival stores come under pressure, it tells us something about how deep the pressure has gone. Not every closure affects basic survival. Some affect the texture of daily life. Specialty stores, clothing stores, home goods stores, outdoor retailers, candle shops, children's clothing stores, kitchen stores. Brands that once depended on people wandering through shopping centers, discovering something, touching the product, trying it on, or buying because they were already there. That behavior has changed. People browse differently now. They compare prices on phones. They buy directly online. They wait for discounts. They use second-hand platforms. They avoid unnecessary trips. They ask whether they really need the item at all. This is partly technology, but it is also pressure. When households feel financially tight, casual browsing becomes less casual. A family that once spent Saturday at a shopping center may now treat shopping as a mission. Get what you need. Avoid impulse purchases. Watch the total. Leave. That shift hurts stores built around discovery. And it changes public life in subtle ways. A mall with fewer specialty stores is not just less profitable, it is less interesting. A shopping center with fewer reasons to linger becomes a place people pass through quickly. The social experience thins out. The retail ecosystem becomes more efficient, but less alive. This is one of the contradictions of modern commerce. The consumer may gain convenience online, but the community loses places where people physically gather without planning it. The internet can replace the transaction. It does not always replace the atmosphere. An atmosphere is part of what makes a place feel alive. A store closure does not end at the front door. It spreads outward. First, the employees lose hours, or transfer if they can. Some find another location. Some cannot. Some leave retail completely. Then the neighboring businesses feel it. A sandwich shop loses lunch traffic. A nail salon loses walk-ins. A small phone repair shop loses visibility. A dry cleaner loses parking lot activity. The shopping center owner loses a tenant. The city loses sales tax. The parking lot feels emptier. The area feels less watched, less active, less maintained. Then perception changes. People begin saying, that plaza is going downhill. And once a place gets that label, it becomes harder to reverse. This is how commercial decline can become psychological decline. The buildings may still be standing, but the feeling changes. A dark storefront tells people something. Several dark storefronts tell them more. A half-empty shopping center changes how residents talk about their own town. It creates the feeling that investment is leaving, and sometimes that feeling becomes accurate. Landlords may lower maintenance. Tenants may negotiate harder. New businesses may hesitate. Customers may choose a newer center 10 minutes away. The loss compounds. This is why one anchor tenant can matter so much. Not because one store alone defines a community, but because retail works through gravity. Large stores pull people in. Smaller stores benefit from the pull. When the large store leaves, gravity weakens. And when gravity weakens, the whole orbit changes. When a store closes, something may eventually replace it. But the replacement is not always equal. A closed pharmacy may become a dollar store. A closed department store may become a warehouse. A closed grocery store may become a storage facility. A closed retail box may sit empty for years. Or the replacement may not be a store at all. It may be online delivery, pickup lockers, curbside fulfillment, a warehouse club farther away, an urgent care clinic, a gym, a call center, a discount chain, a self-storage facility, apartments, or nothing. This is where the future becomes uneven. Because a new model can be more efficient without being more accessible. An app can bring products to a doorstep, but only for people who can use the app, pay the fees, wait for delivery, and resolve problems digitally. A warehouse club can offer value, but only for people who can afford the membership, buy in bulk, store bulk goods, and drive there. A pickup locker can be useful, but it does not replace a pharmacist. A delivery truck can replace a trip, but it does not replace a job in the neighborhood. A fulfillment center can create employment, but it may be miles away, less visible, and less connected to the local daily rhythm. The point is not that old stores were perfect. They were not. Many were understaffed. Some were expensive. Some were poorly maintained. Some were already frustrating. But they were physical. They were accessible in a way that digital systems are not always accessible. You could walk in, ask a question, pay with cash, look at a product, see another person, solve a problem face to face. That kind of access is becoming less guaranteed, and that is the deeper meaning of the store closure trend. America is not only losing stores, it is replacing physical access with systems that work better for some people than others. The future of American retail will not be evenly distributed. Some areas will be fine, more than fine. Wealthier suburbs will have remodeled stores, fast pickup, clean pharmacies, better grocery options, delivery coverage, new shopping centers, warehouse clubs, coffee shops, medical clinics, app-based convenience. The stores may change, but access will remain. Other areas will experience something different. Older stores, more closures, longer drives, fewer pharmacies, fewer grocery options, more empty retail boxes, more dependence on dollar stores, gas stations, or online delivery, less competition, less choice, less convenience. This is the geography of convenience. Not every place loses access at the same speed. Not every community is served with the same confidence. Not every customer is equally profitable. And as retail becomes more data-driven, companies can see that more clearly than ever. They know which stores perform, which neighborhoods spend, which customers order online, which locations have shrink, which leases are expensive, which buildings need investment, which stores are worth saving. The result is a retail map that becomes more precise. But precision can be cruel. It allows companies to invest heavily where the numbers are strongest and withdraw where the numbers are weaker. That may be efficient, but it leaves a question behind. What happens to communities that are not profitable enough to deserve convenience? This question is not theoretical. It is already visible in pharmacy deserts, food deserts, dying malls, empty strip centers, and rural towns where every closure makes the next errand longer. The store closure story is really a geography story, a story about where daily life remains easy and where daily life becomes more work. People often talk about store closures in terms of money. Sales, margins, losses, jobs, rent. But there is another cost that is harder to measure. The psychological cost of watching familiar places disappear. A closed store changes how a neighborhood feels. It creates a small sense of instability. A resident may not say, "The commercial base of my community is weakening." They may say, "Everything around here is closing." That sentence carries more weight than it appears to, because people use familiar businesses as signs that a place is still functioning. The grocery store is open. The pharmacy is open. The mall still has traffic. The plaza still has cars. The lights are still on. These are not just retail facts. They are emotional cues. They tell people that a community is still being served, still being maintained, still worth investing in. When those cues disappear, people begin to feel less certain. Is the area declining? Will property values suffer? Will more stores leave? Will crime increase in empty parking lots? Will my elderly parents still have what they need nearby? Will my teenager find a local job? Will this town still feel like itself in 5 years? These questions may never appear in a company earnings call, but they appear in ordinary conversations. In parking lots, on neighborhood Facebook groups, at kitchen tables, between people who notice that the place they live is losing pieces slowly. This is why store closures can feel larger than the buildings themselves. They touch belonging. They touch confidence. They touch the feeling that ordinary life is still supported by the world around you. And once that support feels weaker, people begin to live with a low-level sense that they are on their own. At the surface, the story is simple. Stores are closing. Companies are restructuring. Consumers are changing. Costs are rising. Online shopping is growing. But underneath that is a bigger pattern. American life has become more expensive to serve physically. And when something becomes more expensive to serve, institutions become more selective. Retailers close weak stores. Banks close branches. Hospitals consolidate. Schools merge. Restaurants reduce hours. Pharmacies shrink. Public services become thinner. Private services follow profitability. And households are left to manage the gaps. This is the larger system. A household may lose a nearby pharmacy, then a grocery store, then a bank branch, then a bus route, then a local clinic. Each change has its own explanation, but the person living through them experiences one reality. Daily life is getting harder to navigate. That is why retail closures connect so closely to the middle-class squeeze. The cost of living is not only the price of goods, it is also the cost of access. How far do you have to drive? How much time do you lose? Do you need a car? Do you need an app? Do you need a credit card? Do you need a subscription? Do you need someone to help? Do you still have choices? These questions define modern affordability as much as the price tag does. A gallon of milk may cost one amount, but if the nearest affordable store is now 30 minutes away, the real cost has changed. A prescription may cost the same, but if the pickup now requires a ride, the real cost has changed. A product may be available online, but if delivery fees, minimum orders, and digital barriers are involved, the real cost has changed. This is the part people often miss. When stores disappear, prices are not the only thing that changes. The burden of getting things shifts onto the customer. More time, more planning, more transportation, more digital navigation, more dependence. And for a squeezed household, those burdens matter. The American store is still here. The lights are still on, in many places. The carts still move through the aisles. The shelves are still stocked. The parking lots are still full in the strongest locations. But the map is changing. Some stores are being improved. Some are being automated. Some are being converted. Some are being closed. And some communities are discovering that the places they depended on were never guaranteed. They were only there as long as the numbers worked. That is the quiet truth behind store closures. A company can leave a neighborhood without ever saying the neighborhood was abandoned. It can simply say the location was underperforming. But the people left behind know what changed. The drive got longer. The errand got harder. The prescription got less convenient. The job disappeared. The shopping center got darker. The town felt a little less alive. Retail closures are easy to overlook because they happen one sign at a time, one lease at a time, one location at a time. But eventually, those signs begin to form a pattern. And the pattern is not only about where Americans shop, it is about where American life remains easy enough to live, and where it quietly becomes harder.